I thought house sitting would be easy money a few years back when I started my freelance pet care business. Most clients just wanted someone to feed their cats, water their plants, and make sure nobody broke in while they vacationed in Cabo or visited family for the holidays. What I didn't expect was that staying alone in other people's homes would teach me that some houses hold more than just furniture and memories, and that animals can see things we definitely cannot. It was March 15th, 2022, when I first realized that animals see things we can't. I was house sitting for the Hendersons, a quiet couple in their 60s who lived in a modest ranch home on Maple Street in suburban Denver. They had asked me to watch their Chameleon Bonaparte while they spent 2 weeks visiting their daughter in Seattle. And at first, I thought this would be the easiest job ever. Just feed a reptile and water some plants. Bonaparte lived in a custom terrarium near the living room window, a beautiful setup with live plants, climbing branches, and UV lighting that made his green and brown scales shimmer like jewels. During the day, he would position himself on his favorite branch, directly facing the large picture window that looked out onto the front yard. And he had this way of moving his eyes independently that always made me feel like he was judging me. The house itself felt heavy somehow, like the air was thicker than it should be. Mrs. Henderson had mentioned during our walkthrough that they'd lived there for 37 years, raised 3 children within those walls. The photographs lining the hallway showed decades of birthday parties, Christmas mornings, graduation ceremonies, all the normal milestones of family life. But something about the way the shadows fell in the afternoon light made me uneasy, like the house was holding its breath. That first evening, around 8:30 p.m., I was sitting on a couch about 6 feet away from his terrarium, just watching the way pet sitters do when they're trying to bond at their temporary charges. Bonaparte was perched motionless on his branch, both of his independently moving eyes focused on me with that unnerving chameleon intensity that makes you feel like you're being studied under a microscope. The living room lights were on bright against the March darkness outside, and the window had become a perfect mirror, reflecting the entire room behind me. I could see myself on the couch, Bonaparte in his terrarium, and the hallway entrance in the glass surface. Everything looked normal until it didn't. And what happened next still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. A dark figure moved across the reflection behind me. Not a shadow from the ceiling fan, not the flicker of a candle flame, but the distinct silhouette of a person walking from the hallway toward the kitchen area. The movement was deliberate and purposeful, like someone who belonged to the house and knew exactly where they were going. The figure appeared to be tall with broad shoulders, wearing what looked like dark clothing, moving with the confidence of someone familiar with the layout. My blood turned cold, but what made it worse was Bonaparte's reaction. And this is when I learned that animals know things we don't. Both of his eyes, which had been watching me, suddenly snapped towards something behind my left shoulder. His entire body flinched backward on the branch, and his color began shifting to the darker browns and blacks that chameleons display when they're stressed or frightened. His head tilted at an angle that suggested he was tracking movement, his eyes following something as it apparently walked from one side of the room to the other. I spun around immediately, heart hammering in my chest. Nothing was there. The hallway was empty. The kitchen doorway showed only darkness. I could hear the refrigerator humming, the heating system cycling on, but no footsteps, no breathing, no sign of another person. The house felt exactly as empty as it should have been with just me and Bonaparte inside. Yet something had been there, something only he could see. Bonaparte remained agitated for the next 20 minutes, his eyes tracking something invisible as it apparently moved through the house. First, he watched the hallway entrance. Then his gaze shifted to follow whatever it was as it moved toward the kitchen, then back toward the bedrooms. His color stayed dark, his body language tense like a guard animal on high alert, protecting against a threat I couldn't perceive. I checked every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. The doors were locked. The windows were secure. The security system showed no breaches. The basement was empty. The garage was locked from the inside. Yet Bonaparte's behavior told me we were not alone. Something was moving through that house, something only he could see and track with those prehistoric eyes. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house settling made me sit up and listen. Every car passing on the street outside made me peer through the curtains. Bonaparte stayed awake too, positioned on his branch like a sentinel, watching the darkness beyond his terrarium. I started leaving more lights on after that, telling myself it was to keep Bonaparte comfortable, but really it was because darkness felt too heavy in that house, like it was hiding something. The second night, March 16th, brought more of the same. Around 9:15 p.m., Bonaparte's eyes suddenly locked onto something near the hallway again. Both pupils tracking in perfect unison, as if watching a person walk slowly across the room. I sat perfectly still, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, watching his eyes move from left to right, then pause as if whatever he was seeing had stopped directly behind my chair. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. I could see my breath for just a moment, like a puff of steam in cold air. Then the sensation passed and Bonaparte relaxed, his coloring shifting back to normal greens and browns. I spent the rest of that evening researching chameleon behavior, trying to find scientific explanations for what I was seeing, but nothing in the literature mentioned tracking invisible objects or stress responses to empty rooms. 3 months later, I accepted a job house, sitting for my friend Marcus while he traveled to Europe for work. Marcus lived in a converted loft downtown, and I was excited to stay somewhere with city energy after weeks of suburban silence. His place was modern, clean, with exposed brick walls and large industrial windows that looked out over the warehouse district where old factories had been converted into trendy living spaces. The loft had an open floor plan with 20-foot ceilings and polished concrete floors, the kind of space that should feel airy and bright, but instead felt cavernous, especially at night. Marcus had mentioned that the building used to be a textile factory back in the 1920s before being converted to residential units in the early 2000s. Sometimes old buildings carry the weight of their history in ways you can feel but can't quite explain, like emotional residue left behind by decades of human activity. June 8th was my third night there. I had fallen asleep easily in Marcus's king-size bed, exhausted from a long day of client visits. Around 2:15 a.m., something jolted me awake. Not a sound, not a dream, but that electric feeling you get when someone is staring at you. The kind of awareness that makes your skin crawl and your heart rate spike even before you're fully conscious, like some primitive part of your brain detecting danger. I opened my eyes and saw the silhouette of a person standing beside the bed. The figure was tall, thin, completely motionless in the darkness, standing about 3 feet from where I lay. My sleep-fogged brain immediately assumed it was Marcus. Maybe he had come home early from his trip without telling me. Stranger things had happened with last-minute flight changes, people losing passports, missing connections, and ending up on earlier flights home than planned. "Oh my God, you scared me," I said with a nervous laugh, already reaching my arms out for a hug. "When did you get back? Did your flight get canceled or something?" The figure moved toward the bed, and I felt the mattress dip as someone got in beside me. The movement was slow, deliberate, like someone being careful not to wake a sleeping partner. I reached out to embrace who I thought was my friend, my arms wrapping around what should have been shoulders, a torso, the familiar warmth of another person. But instead, my arms closed around absolutely nothing, just cold air and empty space. The mattress was still compressed as if someone was lying there, the depression in the memory foam clearly visible in the dim light filtering through the industrial windows. But I felt no body heat, no breathing, no physical presence. My hands passed through space that should have contained a person, like trying to hug a ghost or embrace shadow itself. Panic shot through me like ice water. I rolled away from the empty depression in the bed and fumbled for the lamp on the nightstand, my hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries to find the switch. When the light clicked on, the room was completely empty. No one on the bed, no one standing beside it. The door was closed exactly as I had left it. The security chain was still in place. I grabbed my phone and called Marcus immediately, even though I knew it was the middle of the night in Europe. "Hey, it's like 9 a.m. here," he answered groggily from Amsterdam. "Everything okay? What's wrong? You sound panicked. Are you definitely in Amsterdam right now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Like, definitely not in your apartment? Because something just happened." "Yes, definitely. I'm looking at the canals outside my hotel window." "Why? What's wrong? What happened? Tell me." I told him everything. The figure beside the bed, the feeling of the mattress compressing, the sensation of someone getting into bed with me. He listened without interrupting, then suggested maybe I had been dreaming or experiencing sleep paralysis. But I knew the difference between a dream and the feeling of a mattress compressing under actual weight. Maybe it's the building, Marcus said finally. Other tenants have mentioned weird things happening late at night. Old factory buildings sometimes have electrical issues that can cause hallucinations, strange magnetic fields that affect your brain chemistry, make you see things that aren't there. I spent the rest of the night on his couch with every light in the apartment blazing, checking the locks every hour until sunrise. The next few nights passed without incident, but I never felt completely comfortable sleeping in that bedroom again, like something had claimed that space and I was the intruder. By September, I thought I was getting used to the strange things that seemed to happen when you stayed in other people's spaces. That's when Mrs. Patterson hired me to watch her house while she visited her sister in Florida. And this job would teach me that some mysteries have no explanation, no matter how hard you try to rationalize them. Mrs. Patterson was 81 years old and lived alone in a Victorian-era home that her family had owned for 3 generations. The house was a beautiful example of 1890s architecture with original hardwood floors, stained glass windows, and intricate woodwork that spoke of a time when craftsmanship mattered more than speed or profit. She had 2 elderly cats, Whiskers and Mittens, who were sweet-natured despite their advanced age of 16 and 17 years old. They came and went through a cat flap in the kitchen door, spending their days napping in sunny spots, and their evenings curled up wherever I happened to be sitting. They were the kind of cats who seemed to understand that their human was away and appreciated having someone around keep them company. The house felt different from the Hendersons' place and Marcus's loft. Where those locations had felt heavy or too empty, Mrs. Patterson's house felt alive in a way that was hard to describe, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. The floorboards creaked in specific patterns, the pipes sang when water ran through them, and the windows seemed to rattle even when there was no wind outside. September 23rd, around 3:20 a.m., loud meowing woke me from deep sleep. It sounded like both cats were downstairs in distress. Maybe the cat flap had jammed, and they couldn't get outside to use their preferred bathroom spot in the garden. I pulled on my robe and headed downstairs, the wooden steps groaning under my weight in the way old houses do, like they're complaining about being disturbed. I opened the door from the staircase to the main hallway and froze, because what I saw defied every expectation of reality. At least 15 black cats sat in perfect formation facing me. They were arranged in 3 neat rows like an audience waiting for a performance. Their yellow eyes reflected the hallway light, creating an eerie constellation of glowing dots in the darkness. None of them moved, none of them made a sound. They just sat there watching me with that intense feline focus that makes you feel like you're being judged by creatures who understand secrets you'll never know. Behind them, I could see Whiskers and Mittens sitting calmly among the group, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Whiskers was positioned in the front row, slightly to the left, while Mittens sat in the middle row, grooming her paw with complete nonchalance, like midnight gatherings of mysterious cats were just part of the normal routine. The black cats were all different sizes, some sleek and well-fed, others lean and wiry, but all completely motionless except for their eyes, which tracked my movement as I stepped into the hallway. The largest one, a Tom with battle scars across his face, sat dead center in the front row like he was the leader of whatever strange gathering this was. The air in the hallway felt thick, almost humid despite the cool September night outside. I could smell cat fur and something else, something earthy and wild like forest floor after rain. The silence was complete except for my own heartbeat thundering in my ears and the distant sound of the grandfather clock ticking in the living room. Whiskers let out a happy chirp and stood up, stretching as if greeting me after a normal night. Her tail was up, her posture relaxed. She patted over to me and rubbed against my legs, purring loudly. Mittens yawned and began grooming her paw more vigorously. The 15 black cats remained perfectly still, like statues carved from shadow. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes, trying to process what I was seeing. The cats showed no aggression, no fear, just patient observation, as if they were waiting for something. A signal, a command, Some kind of acknowledgement from me that would trigger the next phase of whatever ritual this was. Slowly, very slowly, I backed up the stairs, keeping my eyes on the group, afraid that sudden movement might trigger some kind of response. When I reached the top step, I closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. I could hear no sound from the hallway below. No meowing, no movement, nothing but the continued ticking of that grandfather clock. When I came down at 7 a.m., they were gone. Whiskers and Mittens were sleeping peacefully on the kitchen windowsill in a patch of morning sunlight. The cat flap moved freely when I tested it. There was no sign that 15 extra cats had ever been in the house. No fur on the furniture, no muddy paw prints on the hardwood floors, no lingering scent of multiple animals. I called Mrs. Patterson to ask if neighborhood cats sometimes gathered in her hallway, trying to keep my voice casual. "Oh no, dear," she said. "Whiskers and Mittens don't really like other cats. They're quite territorial. They barely tolerate each other most days. I've never seen a stray cat come near the house. They're very good at keeping their territory clear." I spent the rest of my stay wondering where those cats had come from and how they had gotten inside. But Whiskers and Mittens seemed completely unfazed. The next few nights passed without incident, though I did notice both cats spending more time staring at empty corners of rooms, their heads tilted as if listening to sounds I couldn't hear. October brought a different kind of strangeness when I moved into my own apartment for the first time. It was a small one-bedroom in a converted house near the university campus. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, and I was proud to finally have my own space after years of temporary living situations and couch surfing and house sitting for other people. The apartment was on the second floor of a 1940s colonial that had been divided into 4 units. Mine faced a street with large windows that let in plenty of natural light. The landlord had recently renovated, so everything was fresh paint, new fixtures, modern appliances. It should have felt like a clean slate, a place where nothing strange had happened because it was mine and I was in control. 2 weeks after moving in, October 14th, I found a small flower necklace in my mailbox. Delicate plastic daisies on a thin chain, clearly handmade. The kind of thing you might buy at a craft fair or make in an art class. The colors were bright pink and yellow with green leaves that looked hand-painted with careful attention to detail. I assumed someone had mixed up the mailboxes. The previous tenant had been a young woman. Maybe the gift was meant for her. I threw it away and thought nothing more about it. College towns are full of romantic gestures and mistaken deliveries. It seemed like the most logical explanation for someone receiving a random gift. The next day, there was a pair of sunglasses and a handwritten note in my mailbox. "Hey, I think you look good in these. You should wear them next time we're together. Hope to see you soon. XOXO." The handwriting was feminine, curved letters with little hearts dotting the I's and small flourishes on the capital letters. The sunglasses were oversized with pink frames, clearly meant for a woman. Whoever was leaving these gifts obviously had me confused with someone else. Maybe they thought I was the previous tenant or had the wrong apartment number entirely. I kept the note as potential evidence and threw away the sunglasses, but I started paying more attention to who was around when I checked my mail. I lived in a busy area with lots of foot traffic. Students walking to campus, neighbors coming and going, delivery drivers making stops. Anyone could have access to the mailbox area without arousing suspicion. 3 days later, October 18th, I came home expecting to find another gift in my mailbox, but it was empty. I felt relieved walking up the outside stairs to my second-floor apartment. Maybe my mystery admirer had figured out their mistake and moved on to the correct recipient. Then I saw the underwear hanging from my door handle. Red lace panties tied to the knob with a white ribbon. My stomach dropped. This person had been to my actual door. They knew exactly which apartment was mine. This wasn't a mailbox mix-up anymore. This was someone deliberately targeting my home. They walked up the stairs, stood outside my door, and left an intimate gift where only I would find it. The implications hit me like cold water. Someone had been watching me long enough to know where I lived, which door was mine, probably what time I usually came and went. They had chosen to escalate from anonymous gifts in a public mailbox to personal items left at my private entrance. This felt predatory, invasive, dangerous. I wrote a note and taped it to my door. I don't know who you are, but you need to stop. I'm not whoever you think I am. Please leave me alone. The gift stopped immediately. Exactly 1 year later, October 14th, 2023, I found another flower necklace in my mailbox. Identical to the first one. Same plastic daisies, same thin chain, same hand-painted details. The sight of it made my hands shake. Whoever had been leaving gifts had remembered the exact date, had waited an entire year, and then resumed their strange ritual. I ripped it apart, threw it in the nearby dumpster, and went upstairs shaking. The fact that someone had marked their calendar for the specific date, the anniversary of their first gift, made it feel even more deliberate, more planned, like they'd been counting down the days until they could resume contact. Nothing since then, but every October 14th I check my mailbox with sweaty palms, wondering if this year will be the year they come back, wondering what else they might escalate to after flowers and sunglasses and underwear. November 2023 brought a house, sitting job, that still makes me question what I heard that night. My friend Sarah's grandparents needed someone to watch their 2 small dogs while her grandfather worked night shifts and her grandmother was visiting family in Texas. The house was a 1960s ranch with a large screen back porch that faced a wooded area. Perfect for someone who wanted privacy, but potentially concerning for someone staying alone. The nearest neighbors were far enough away that you couldn't see their lights through the trees. The kind of isolation that feels peaceful during the day but ominous after dark. The dogs, Max and Bella, were Yorkshire Terriers weighing maybe 4 pounds each, but they made up for their size with attitude. They followed me everywhere, tails wagging constantly, happy to have someone paying attention to them. During the day, they were delightful companions, but at night, they became nervous, pacing the house and whimpering at sounds I couldn't hear. November 9th, around 10:30 p.m., I was relaxing in the bathtub after a long day of client visits. The bathroom had a skylight that looked up at the stars, and I was enjoying the peaceful silence when I heard voices. Whispering, hushed tones coming from directly above me on the back porch. The voices were too quiet for me to make out words, but I could hear the rhythm of conversation. 2 people talking back and forth, one voice slightly deeper than the other. The tone was urgent, secretive, like people sharing information they didn't want overheard, like conspirators planning something they didn't want discovered. I held my breath and listened, straining to catch any actual words, but the voices remained just below the threshold of understanding. Then Max and Bella started barking their heads off from inside the house, their tiny voices raised in alarm, sharp yips that echoed through the empty rooms like fire alarms. My blood ran cold. I jumped out of the tub, pulled on my clothes, and grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. As quietly as possible, I approached the back door and peered through curtains. The porch was visible in the moonlight, empty chairs and tables casting long shadows, but no people, no sign of the voices I clearly heard. The voices had stopped completely. I unlocked the door and stepped outside, my bare feet silent on the cold concrete. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. I walked the entire perimeter of the house, checking behind bushes, under the deck, around the shed that sat at the edge of the property, looking for any sign of intruders. Nothing. No footprints in the soft dirt around the porch. No sign that anyone had been there. No disturbed vegetation. No dropped cigarette butts. No evidence of human presence. But I knew what I had heard, and the dogs had heard it too. They were still agitated when I came back inside, pacing and whining, looking toward the back door like they expected something to come through it. Sarah's grandfather upgraded their security system the next day. Motion sensors, floodlights, cameras pointed at every entrance. He didn't ask questions, just said it was probably time for better protection given how isolated the house was. But I could tell he believed me about the voices, even if he didn't say so directly. December found me house, sitting for Professor Williams while she attended a conference in Chicago. She lived in a safe college town, the kind of place where people still left their doors unlocked and kids rode bikes after dark. Her apartment was on the 2nd floor of a converted Victorian house, with street parking and a view of the campus. The building was well maintained with good lighting and electronic locks on the main entrance. Professor Williams had lived there for over a decade and said she'd never had any problems with break-ins or unwanted visitors. The neighborhood was full of professors and graduate students, quiet people who kept to themselves and minded their own business. December 15th, I woke up around 6 a.m. needing to use the bathroom. As I sat there, half asleep in the pre-dawn darkness, I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door creaking open. The sound was distinctive, heavy with swinging on old hinges, followed by the slight whistle of wind through the gap. My heart started pounding. I carefully left the bathroom and peered around the corner toward the front entrance, expecting to see an intruder or maybe Professor Williams returning early from her conference. The door was open about 6 inches, letting in cold winter air and the sound of early morning traffic from the street below. I could see snow swirling in the gap, illuminated by the hallway light, like tiny dancers caught in the beam. I crept through the apartment, checking every room for intruders, every closet, every possible hiding place. Nothing. The door had somehow unlocked itself during the night and opened just enough to let me know something was wrong, just enough to announce its presence without revealing its purpose. I checked the lock mechanism. It was functioning properly. No signs of tampering, no scratches around the keyhole, no indication that someone had picked the lock or forced entry. I checked with Professor Williams to see if she had given keys to anyone else. Maintenance workers, cleaning services, family members. She hadn't. The building super said he had no reason to enter her apartment while she was away. I spent the rest of my stay sleeping with a kitchen knife on the nightstand and a chair propped against the front door. But nothing else happened. The door stayed locked and closed for the remaining 4 nights I was there, like whatever had opened had made its point and moved on. January 2024 brought an incident that reminded me how isolation can play tricks on your mind. I was staying in a house in a rural area outside town, watching 2 cats for a family who had gone skiing in Colorado. The house sat on 5 acres surrounded by pine trees and meadows, beautiful during the day, but eerily quiet at night. January 8th, around 2 p.m., I was working on my laptop when I heard loud voices and music coming from upstairs. It sounded like a party. Multiple people talking, laughing, feet moving around like dancing. The music was faint but rhythmic, like a radio playing in another room. Turned down low, but still audible. I was annoyed at first, thinking maybe the neighbors were being inconsiderate. Then I remembered this house was set back from the road with no close neighbors. The nearest house was over a mile away through dense woods. I texted the homeowner, asking if anyone else had keys to the house. No one should be there. We're in Aspen until Thursday. Why? What's happening? Is everything okay? I grabbed a baseball bat from the garage and went upstairs to investigate. The sounds were coming from the master bedroom, but when I opened the door, the room was empty. The music stopped immediately, like someone had turned off a radio. The silence that followed felt heavy, pregnant with something I couldn't name. I went outside and looked up at the house. No lights were on, no cars in the driveway, no footprints in the snow around the building. The sound had been so clear, so obviously from inside the house. But there was no explanation for what I had heard, no logical reason for party sound to emanate from an empty room. Spring arrived with a house-sitting job that genuinely terrified me. I was staying in a cabin in rural New Hampshire for a week, watching a friend's property while he traveled for work. The nearest neighbors were a quarter-mile away in either direction, the kind of place where you could scream and no one would hear you, where anything had happened and no one would know. The cabin was rustic but comfortable, with a stone fireplace, knotty pine walls, and large windows that looked out into dense forest. During the day, it felt like a peaceful retreat, but at night, the isolation became oppressive. The darkness outside was complete. No street lights, no house lights, just an ocean of black trees pressing against the windows like they were trying to get inside. April 3rd was a clear morning with a late frost. I went out to my car to drive into town for groceries. The rear window was covered with ice crystals that had formed overnight, delicate patterns that caught the morning light like spider webs, intricate and beautiful, until I saw what someone had written in them. Someone had written a message in the frost with their finger. I watch you. The letters were large and deliberate, pressed deep into the ice so they wouldn't fade quickly. Each letter was carefully formed with thick strokes, like someone had taken their time to make sure the message was clear, readable, unmistakable. I looked around the property frantically, scanning the tree line for any sign of another person. Saw no footprints leading to or from my car, no sign of another vehicle, no disturbance in the frost on the other windows. Just those 4 words written with deliberate intent by someone who had been close enough to touch my car. I took photos with my phone, then scraped the message away, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the ice scraper. The implications were terrifying. Someone had been close enough to my car to write on the window. Someone had been watching me long enough to know my schedule, to know when I would find a message. I never saw anyone during the rest of my stay, but I felt eyes on me whenever I went outside. I started parking closer to the cabin and keeping the curtains drawn at night. The feeling of being observed was constant, like an itch I couldn't scratch, like invisible cameras following my every movement. May brought a mystery that I still think about. I was staying at my brother's apartment while he was deployed overseas. The place was almost empty, just basic furniture and appliances, barely anything to hide a secret. My brother was minimalist by nature, and military life had taught him to travel light, own only what he could carry. The apartment was in a modern complex with good security, electronic keypad entry, and cameras in all the common areas. It should have been one of the safest places I'd ever house sat. Yet something about the emptiness made every sound seem amplified. Every shadow seemed darker, like the absence of personal belongings had created a vacuum that other things rushed in to fill. May 12th, around 11:45 p.m., I was reading in bed when I heard a cell phone ringing somewhere in the apartment. Not a modern ringtone, but an old Nokia ring, the kind you hear in horror movies, harsh and electronic. A sound that cuts through silence like a knife through fabric. I searched everywhere for the source of sound, checked every drawer, every cabinet, every possible location where someone might hide a phone. The apartment was small, with an open floor plan. There weren't many places to conceal anything, but the ringing seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, like it was emanating from the walls themselves. The sound continued for about 5 minutes, then stopped abruptly, like someone had answered the call or let it go to voicemail. I texted my brother asking if he had left any electronic devices behind. He said no, he'd taken everything with him when he deployed, even his backup phone chargers. I never heard the sound again, but I also never found where it came from. The mystery bothered me for the rest of my stay. The idea that something was hidden in that apartment. Something I couldn't locate despite searching every inch of the space, every possible hiding place. June brought an incident that still makes me check the locks twice. I was staying in a downtown apartment, watching a friend's place while she visited family. The building was secure with a doorman and electronic key access, the kind of place where you should feel completely safe, surrounded by other tenants and professional security. June 18th, around 3:30 a.m., something woke me from deep sleep. Not a sound, but a sensation, like being watched. I opened my eyes and immediately knew someone had been in the room. My left cheek was stinging, and my ears were ringing like I had been slapped hard across the face. The pain was sharp and immediate, the kind that comes from real physical contact, not a dream or hallucination. I sat up immediately and turned on every light in the apartment. The front door was locked, the chain was in place, all the windows were secured. But my face hurt for the rest of the night, and I could taste copper in my mouth. I called building security and asked if anyone had entered the building during the night. They checked the logs and said no one had come or gone after midnight. The doorman swore he hadn't left his post, hadn't seen anyone suspicious. But the sting on my cheek lasted for hours, like someone had marked me. July gave me a mystery that turned out to have a logical explanation, but scared me badly before I figured it out. I was staying at my uncle's apartment while he worked double shifts at the hospital. His building was older but well-maintained, in a quiet neighborhood near the medical district. July 22nd. I was sitting in the living room when I heard a woman's voice calling from somewhere nearby. "Hey, you there? Hey, you there?" The voice was clear and seemed to be directed at me. A friendly tone but insistent, like someone trying to get my attention. I answered back but got no response. This happened several times over the next few days. Always the same phrase, always the same tone, but never any reply when I tried to respond. I finally asked my uncle about it when he got home from work. He laughed and pointed across the hall to his neighbor's apartment. "That's Rodriguez's parrot," he said. "Pepe can mimic voices perfectly. He's been copying his owner's girlfriend for years. She calls to him from work every day around the same time." The relief I felt was enormous, but it reminded me how easy it is to assume something supernatural when there's usually a perfectly normal explanation. The human brain wants to find patterns, wants to create stories, even when the truth is much simpler, much less frightening. August brought me back to a familiar fear when I was house sitting for a couple who lived in an older home with a finished basement. I was staying in their guest room on the main floor, but the basement held their home office, and I needed to use their computer to submit some reports for my business. August 5th, around 1:20 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps pacing back and forth in the basement. Heavy, deliberate steps like someone walking the length of the room over and over. The rhythm was consistent, like someone thinking through a problem or waiting for something or someone. I grabbed a flashlight and crept downstairs. The basement was empty, but I could still hear the footsteps. They seemed to be coming from directly above me now, on the main floor. I went back upstairs and the sound had moved to the basement again, like whatever was making the noise was deliberately staying on the floor opposite from where I was. This continued for about an hour, the footsteps always seeming to be on the floor opposite from where I was standing. I never found the source, but I didn't sleep well for the rest of that week. Every night brought the same pacing sounds, the same sense that someone was walking through that house, someone I couldn't see or catch or confront. September brought an incident that happened just 2 days ago and still has me questioning what I experienced. I was staying at a friend's house while she was out of town. Her place is usually kept warm during the winter months with space heaters in the bedrooms. Older house with poor insulation, so the heaters are essential for comfort. September 23rd, I came home from running errands and found both kitchen and living room windows wide open, which was strange because it's winter and the whole point is keeping the heat inside. I called my friend to ask if she had opened them before leaving. She said no. She specifically made sure everything was closed and locked. While I was still on the phone with her, I walked into the bedroom and found both space heaters had been moved to the center of the room and turned on high, with a damp towel stretched between them. The setup looked deliberate, like someone had carefully positioned everything for a specific purpose. The smell was strange, not like urine or anything I could identify, but definitely unpleasant. Chemical, almost like cleaning products mixed with something organic, something that had been rotting or fermenting. My friend insisted she hadn't touched the heaters before leaving and said she definitely hadn't left any wet towels lying around. I moved everything back where it belonged, but I still don't have an explanation for what happened. Someone or something had been in that house, had deliberately moved those heaters and left that towel. The windows being open suggested they wanted fresh air, maybe to clear out whatever smell the towel was producing. As I sit here writing this on September 25th, I've been house sitting for almost 3 years. I've stayed in dozens of homes, watched hundreds of pets, and experienced things that don't fit into neat explanations, things that resist logic and reason no matter how hard you try to make sense of them. Most of the time, there are logical reasons for strange occurrences. Loose floorboards that creak, settling foundations that groan, pipes that bang, electronic devices that malfunction. Old buildings have their own personalities, their own quirks. But some things resist explanation no matter how hard you try to rationalize them. Animals definitely see things we don't. Bonaparte the chameleon taught me that his eyes tracking movement I couldn't see, his color changes indicating stress when nothing visible was happening. Whiskers and Mittens somehow knew those 15 black cats were coming before I did. They were calm when they should have been territorial. The Yorkshire Terriers heard those voices on the porch before I did, their tiny bodies trembling with awareness. Houses hold memories. Maybe that's all it is. The accumulated energy of everyone who has lived and loved and argued and cried within those walls. Sometimes the energy feels heavier, more present, especially when you're alone in unfamiliar spaces, sleeping in beds that aren't yours, eating from plates that hold a residue of other people's lives. The gift giver who targeted my apartment remains a mystery. The precision of their timing, the escalation from public to private spaces, the year-long gap before resuming contact, all point to someone with patience and planning. Someone who sees me as more than a random recipient of mistaken identity. Someone who has made me part of their story in ways I'll never understand. I still take house-sitting jobs because I need the income and because most of my experiences are positive. But I've learned to trust my instincts when something feels wrong. I keep emergency contacts ready. I tell people exactly where I'll be and when I'll be back. I carry a small knife and know how to use it. The footsteps that seem to follow me from room to room, the doors that open themselves, the messages written in frost, all suggest that the boundary between what we can see and what exists is thinner than we want to believe. Maybe it's electromagnetic fields. Maybe it's psychological pressure. Maybe it's something else entirely. Something we don't have names for yet. Next month marks 2 years since the last flower necklace appeared. I'm hoping whoever was leaving those gifts has moved on to a different obsession. But part of me dreads checking my mailbox every October 14th. The calendar date burned into my memory like a scar, like a warning of something that might return. House sitting has taught me that we share our spaces with more than we realize. Whether it's energy from previous occupants, electromagnetic anomalies that affect our perception, or simply the power of suggestion working on tired minds. Spending time alone in other people's homes makes you aware of how much we don't understand about the places we inhabit. Tonight, I'm staying at my own apartment for the first time in weeks. No clients, no unfamiliar sounds, no surprise visitors. Just me and the normal creaks and groans of a building I've learned to recognize. But even here in my own space, I still check the locks twice before bed. I still listen for footsteps that shouldn't be there, and I still pay attention when my pet clients act nervous. Because animals always know first. The thing about house sitting is that you become temporary guardian of someone else's life, their routines, their secrets, their accumulated history. You sleep in their beds, use their towels, eat food from their refrigerator, and sometimes you discover that houses remember more than we think they do. Sometimes they hold on to things that should have moved on. If you've made it this far in my story, I hope you'll subscribe to hear more unusual experiences from people who work in jobs that put them in strange situations. Hit the like button if any of these incidents reminded you of something you've experienced yourself, and share this with anyone who might have their own unexplained stories to tell. Because the more we talk about these things, the less alone we feel when they happen to us. And maybe someday we'll figure out what's really going on in the spaces between what we can see and what we know is there.